Due to the ambiguity and the consequent uncertainty arising from the full court's judgment in Polwell and Bunting versus the Attorney General, the Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, yesterday advised that she is unable to carry out the functions of her office at this time. The Public Service Commission was invited to appoint a qualified person to act in the role of Director of Public Prosecutions for the time being. That resulted in the temporary appointment of Claudette Thompson, a Senior Deputy Director in the Office of the DPP, for a 6-month period. However, the issue is not yet completely settled, as plans to appeal the full court's decision are already underway. Tonight, in Lead Story, we seek to decode the DPP's decision and the implications for Jamaica's justice system. I'm Nika Lewis, and this is Lead Story. Welcome. Joining us in studio is Attorney at Law and Principal Director of the National Integrity Action, NIA, Daniel Archer. And I have also Mr. Michael Williams, Attorney at Law and Political Commentator. Welcome, both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, firstly, so much has happened since the weekend up to this point, but what have you made of the handling of the situation surrounding the DPP's office? Would you agree that it has been less than seamless? I'll start with the lady. Daniel, you first.
Less than seamless is a very nice way to put it, Nika. Always nice of you to look at it that way. I think there's a larger picture at play. There are so many moving parts that you ask yourself, what's happening? You look at the instructions that are being given, legal advice that is being given, who is it being given, who's it coming from? What's the content of that advice? It makes it appear, unfortunately, that the whole notion of separation of powers is being questioned. The level of the political involvement in this matter, the expectations that have come about because of the comments that were made by the political directorate when they initially sought to ram the amendment through Parliament. Many questions, and I think the situation that we are seeing this weekend is indicative of the very fact that the amendment ought not to be handled in the way it was handled.
What say you, Mr. Williams?
Well, from Friday, I've been wearing the national colours.
I can see that. Is that
I have deliberately worn the national colour to court on Friday. And I have been stating what the decision would have been, and it is exactly what I thought it would have been. There's absolutely no ambiguity about that judgment. Your setup says ambiguity. I hear all of this nonsense about ambiguity. There's no ambiguity. The court found that the appointment, a second extension of the DPP's tenure was null, void, and without legal effect. Where is the ambiguity? There's absolutely none. This government, I have been saying this for a long time, has been strikingly failing on governance. As a Jamaican, I am offended that our government could be making us look like we are what they call a banana republic. This kind of slapdash treatment of constitutional issues is nothing short of just vulgarity, Trumpist. I am not going to be diplomatic about this because this is the 4th time the courts have had to tell this regime that its conduct is unconstitutional and the rule of law must prevail. It would appear, I don't know who wrote that release that I saw coming from the AG's chamber. I'm startled. I wonder if we read law at the same law school.
But that's exactly where the ambiguity was mentioned.
There's no ambiguity.
Right. So, Daniel.
I think what we have here, though, is a conundrum because it appears that the persons who are giving advice to the government are seeking to justify their position, which is not really what you do upon getting a declarative relief. You get a declaration. It's a declaration. It declares what the law is. And it's a little bit unusual to say what you've said in the circumstances where the legislation has been interpreted by the court. The court has said a particular position indicating that it's null and void, it's not of legal effect. And so to create this kind of discord surrounding the office of the DPP is unfortunate. And it's unfortunate because it started not just with the judgment itself. It started with the manner in which the amendment was done, the lack of consultation and the fact that it was done in such a swift manner. It begs the question whether or not the government has motive and whether or not there is an interest on the part of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. And I would dare go and say the manner in which it's now being handled, the manner in which we are saying it's going to be appealed and refusing to adhere to the judgment in circumstances has unfortunately brought the office into disrepute. And it is part of the larger issue. I understand the emotions coming from my colleague, but it does play a part in terms of how we're looking at the whole governance issues. The fact that you're now going to be having another matter in court which says to you, your interpretation of the Constitution is incorrect. The manner in which you're seeking to go about your governance, utilizing the law, is incorrect. And then to have the Attorney General, which we're still waiting on the opinion, by the way. And we've not had a word from him about the opinion, except for him to say after another station, I think it wasn't a station, it was JFJ, I think it was,
yes,
who sought to have the document release indicating that it's attorney-client privilege. Now, that's another legal conundrum, because if you were to go to court and hear that it's not covered by attorney-client privilege, that the privilege belongs to Parliament and not to the Speaker, and Parliament doesn't mean just the governing party, then we're setting ourselves up again to have this discussion where we're saying we're in the realm of being governed by persons who either have a scant regard for the Constitution or are seeking to interpret it for the benefit of the governing party.
All right, so the next question, and this time I will pose it to Mr. Williams. Were you in any way surprised or concerned by the issue that was raised by the leader of the opposition, Mark Golding, that Public Service Commission was, quote, negligently allowed to expire on March 31, 2024, prior to this morning's appointment of the acting DPP, Claudette Thompson? Well,
if we examine the fact that they had to hastily assemble a Public Services Commission to deal with this conundrum that they themselves created. And over the weekend, I read somewhere in the media that the People's National Party was disagreeing to either one member or two members. I don't remember the amount.
Yes.
It shows the quality or the lack thereof of leadership which we have running things in this country right now. I keep on referring to it as a regime. I will not cease from doing so until it's straightened up and fly right. You cannot have a services commission,
yes,
whose term has expired and you just sit and wait until you have a crisis like this to appoint people. When the term has expired, you need to immediately assemble men and women who can fill those posts, consult with the opposition, His Majesty's loyal opposition, and you come to a consensus about who is going to form the next Services Commission.
By the way, is it important to have the PSC? Because I'm not sure that this says it is that important.
It is the PSC that appoints some constitutional officers, like the DPP, in consultation with the Prime Minister, leader of opposition, and it is a GG who appoints on the recommendation of the Services Commission. So you need the institution. You can't just bypass it. You can't rule by fiat.
Right, but I want to know if this impacts integrity in governance.
It does. A colleague of mine said today, when we're discussing it, it's governance on demand. And I think it's instructive because what you're doing is you're putting out fires. You're not ensuring that the systems that are going to be there to ensure that there's transparency and accountability are, in fact, instituted. The PSC's job is not just to follow the recommendations of the opposition or the Prime Minister, but also to thoroughly ensure that they vet the persons who are going to be going into these roles. And here's why. When you look at the Constitution and you look at the role of the DPP and all the other roles that the PSC stands, many of them are constitutionally protected. And if they're constitutionally protected, we now find ourselves in a position where you want to ensure that whoever is in the position is more than capable of doing the job with integrity, transparently, has no bias, and has nothing that would bring the institution that it represents into disrepute. So essentially, I do agree with my colleague. It is governance on demand, because what you're seeking to do is you didn't anticipate that you're going to need to have the PSC established, because you didn't anticipate that it's more than likely that you're going to have to appoint other members, such as a DPP, which are necessary. And to do so at short will does give the public the wrong impression that these things are only being done because they have to be done, not because you want to do them, not because you respect the law in doing so, but you're only responding. It's like a knee-jerk reaction to what you need to do. Granted, they might have had a reasonable reason for not extending the commission's tenure or ensuring that it was properly suited for this period. We haven't heard that side yet. Just saying. Just saying, Michael, just saying.
You know.
I'm being magnanimous?
Yes. But let us look at how this government disrespects the rule of law. The court ruled that zones of special operations are unconstitutional. They decided that they're going to appeal. That matter's yet to be heard, but they're still having zones of special operations. Now, if you ask yourself, if you respect the decision of the court, and you have not gotten a decision that says that the ruling of the declaration of the court below is incorrect, you should at least abide the jurisdiction of the court until such time as there's a pronouncement. Otherwise, this government don't respect the rule of law.
It's a great place for us to take a pause because we're up on a quick break, but we'll be right back with this discussion. Welcome back to Lead Story. Our discussion continues. We're talking about the constitutional crisis surrounding the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions and several of the decisions that were made recently. Now, we're back with attorneys Michael Williams. He's an attorney at law and political commentator. And we also have Danielle Archer, Principal Director of the National Integrity Action, NIA, and she's also an attorney at law. No stranger to the media. Now, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So, this one calls for a little speculation, and I hope you can both indulge us, because as legal professionals, what reasonable considerations might be going through the mind of the acting DPP at this time? That's Ms. Claudette Thompson, considering the firestorm that has surrounded that office in recent days.
You know, we're not supposed to speculate, right?
I accept. I said if you could
begging
indulge.
For the indulgence.
If you could indulge.
No. I think I'll err on the side of caution, and I will say, what is unfortunate, Nico, is where we have found ourselves in politicizing the office of the DPP. In my almost 20 years of practice, I have never seen the office so politicized. And I think the effect of that on governance, the effect on that on the confidence that people will have in the institution is something to be concerned about. The office of the DPP is the chief prosecutor in the island. It is perhaps the largest criminal practice that you have in the entire country. They're the ones who decide if charges are actually, after the police did them investigations, then decided them have something. Yes. Do you have something to bring this to the table? And they are the ones who now present the case of the police. Imagine how an average citizen will feel if they are of the view that the chief prosecutor, the office of the DPP, walks sidestep, hand in hand with the political directorate. Party. Do you believe in those circumstances that the average Jamaican who comes before the court, the criminal court for justice, is going to have the confidence to feel that he is going to get a reasonable or a just day in court? What does it say about matters which may concern the political directorate? Are we to be concerned that they will not be prosecuted with the same amount of tenacity that the average Jamaican experiences when he goes before the court? Do you appreciate now why I say that for me it's not speculation as to what is going on in the mind of that person who's now acting? There are other issues that may arise from that.
Yes.
Our concern is looking at the integrity of the institution and how that is going to now play its part in how people perceive governance, because justice being dispensed fairly requires that there is confidence in the office of the DPP. The manner in which the amendment was done, the manner in which the Attorney General's Chambers has come out to say that they're appealing this decision, not recognizing that in law, many lawyers will tell you, there's no stay for declarative relief, there's no stay of a declaration. What's happening here? When you hear the appeal, we're going to appeal this. Don't you have confidence in the system that you are part of? And the lack of confidence does resonate with many Jamaicans looking on and wondering, so if we don't have no money and we're going to go before the court and we're not politically connected, what that mean for we? That's the problem that we found ourselves in. And it's a problem that continues to get worse because of how the government is responding to the judgment. And in the circumstances in which we now have an acting DPP. So the concern I would have if I was in her shoes, unfortunately, would be what's the extent to which politics has damaged or is damaging the integrity or the appearance of integrity of the office.
Mr. Williams, I'm sure Jamaicans are anxiously awaiting your response.
Well, the first question I have, Nika, is why was the most senior person who is a King's Counsel in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution bypassed? I have a question. I don't know why, but I raise the question. It's valuable to raise it.
Bypassed by reason of acting.
Yes.
To act in a 6-month period.
I thought that the King's Counsel in the chambers is the most senior person, and he didn't get there by just sitting on his laurels. So I'm wondering, how did you bypass the most senior person?
Is it that you're suggesting that the fact that the PSC was not properly constituted, they didn't have time to do a proper review of the applications or the persons there, has led them to make a selection which may not necessarily reflect the level of expertise or confidence in the office? Is that what I'm understanding you to say?
That is part of my question, but I don't want to go down that road because I don't know exactly why this most senior person who is a King's Counsel, because the King's Counsel is the most senior person in there.
Yes.
So that is one issue.
Oh, you have a few.
Oh, I have a few. When you look at the fact that the departing DPP, the Minister of Justice,
yes,
and the Attorney General used the self-same language about the issue,
yes,
it raises some serious questions.
What are some
about
of those
the same
questions?
issues that
yes,
Daniel raised a while ago. How politicized the office has become.
okay,
And there are more questions than answers as to people are asking, the public is asking, what was the insistence that this particular DPP remain in office?
Well, if I go from memory, and it's not always impeccable, but this time I think I can recall the Minister of Justice, Delroy Chuck, saying something pertaining to the need for her to retain the post so she could acquire at least her proper pension at the time of...
How many public servants would have had that benefit?
When was the law amended?
No. That's not the issue, ma'am. I think the issue that we have to look at when we're talking about being fair and reasonable, we have a situation in which there were salary increases which were exorbitant on the part of those who lead us.
Yes.
And then you look at the salary increases for the average public servant. If the rationale, as you have debated from your memory, says that it's to ensure that her pension, and I'm not sure if that's the appropriate thing to say.
Because she already got a pension
if that is so,
at 60.
If that is so, can the average civil servant seek an extension so that they can get a proper pension? If the answer is no, then the question is that a reasonable explanation for the extension? And this is why you are going to have to answer many questions now as to what was the reason for this. Why was there such fervor? And we say this in the context of knowing that there is a former Minister of Education who is before the courts and is being prosecuted for acts, alleged acts of corruption. Yes. You say that in the context of this now, what would you say, trepidation, this anxiousness, this eagerness to know whether or not the Integrity Commission has completed their investigations and have tendered a report concerning who many have designed or called the Mysterious Six. These are matters of corruption or allegations of corruption coming and stemming from the governing party. And when we handle the matters in the manner in which they seem to be handled, you cannot deflect the impression that is growing in people's minds that there is some rationale, some security, some motive by ensuring that you have the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions available to be used by the governing party.
I'm flabbergasted. I read the judgment. I cannot see the basis for any appeal. And hold on, I want to be clear. I heard the Attorney General to be saying that the court didn't make a specific declaration that the DPP must demit office. Are we at the stage in this country where the judges have to be called upon to say to an incumbent after they have made a ruling that ergo you should pack your things and go home? Is that the level they want? Would we want to urge that upon the justice to get to that point when their declaration is clear on the face of it and have no other conclusion? Is that as at today, yes, you cannot function in that office?
Danielle, you seem to have something.
Well, you know, pressing. To be fair, and lawyers are available to look at matters and make an alternative determination or interpretation. So we have to do two things. We have to separate the lawyering mode from the governance mode.
Yes.
And appreciate that when you say you are appealing and you're asking for the grounds on which they can appeal,
yes,
it's usually a question of law.
Can they
so
strike
the question
down
of law
Section 2?
would be whether or not the judges correctly interpreted the sections and correctly made the declarations that they did. From a governance perspective, you want to ensure that you're acting in accordance with the directive of the court so that the rest of us looking on will appreciate that there is some respect coming from the leadership. Here is why I say that, Nico. Where we struggle with the most here in Jamaica is following rules. If it is that my leader has gotten an order from the court, there has been, if you believe that there should be a stay, maybe I'm reading a different textbook than you, so I'm putting off my lawyering hat and I'm pretending now not to be an attorney.
Okay.
And all I've heard is this declaration. And I believe that there is supposed to be some other interpretation. But the court says that the law is invalid. What's the example that we set for those looking on? If the majority of our population believes that every time the judge says that you're wrong, you say you're right, and you do according to how you feel, what example is that setting for the population? Is there a better way to do it? Could it have been done in such a way that you should have prepared for this, appreciating that there was a great hue and cry about the amendment?
Well, it's perhaps why the opposition leader has called for some resignations. So I'm going to ask, what do you make of that call for the resignation of the Attorney General and the Justice Minister?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Fair call.
Thank you.
Fear.
Thank you.
It is fear.
I'm about to take my leave.
No, Daniel, you're going to say.
It is a fair call. When you have something that says Section 2, subsection 2 is severed from the Act and is struck down and declared as unconstitutional, null, void, and of no legal effect. And you purport thereafter to say that there's ambiguity, that it is not clear what the judges are saying. Both of you are attorneys at law by profession and not just acting in your respective administrative or ministerial role. You have created a stain that requires that you be removed. They should resign. I agree with the leader of opposition that this kind of conundrum that they have created is enough in any civilized democracy.
I think you can break it apart, Nico, and look at them separately. The question is going to be whether or not the public can have confidence in the Attorney General, whether or not the public continues to have confidence in the Justice Minister. And I think the assessment will come by looking at the many matters that the governing party has had taken to court and have lost, or the other missteps that they have taken in respect of legislation. Let's look at one. And this is all within the purview of the Justice Minister. Appointing a justice of the peace when you know that only notaries, only attorneys at law who have served for 10 years or more can become a notary. Yet we have a justice of the peace who is a notary. How did that occur in breach of a legislation which you're expected to uphold? That's one. Then you also have the instances of the judgments. We have the NIDS judgment, the comments that were made by the court in that matter. The question does arise, are you being given the best possible legal advice to ensure that you're governing fairly in a matter of integrity and transparently? Then you have the other matters that have shown a light on questioning whether or not you do have the legal acumen to guide the governing party on the right path. If the answer to that leaves you in doubt, then I think you would have the answer. If you don't have any doubts, then I guess you're going to say you're satisfied with the leadership that is being given. And one of the things we have to remember, Nico, when it comes to legal advice, when you are giving advice to ensure that many people, the government, it's crucial that you have the best legal expertise possible. And that is for the reason why you often find that those who guide the government are given the titles of King's Counsel upon appointment, because it seems to be that they are the head of their profession.
I know, because we want to know really and truly, will we be seeing Paula Llewellyn, or do you perceive that we will be seeing Paula Llewellyn back in that office as the Director of Public Prosecutions?
Also, the court's judgment, I'm so sorry, Michael.
Go ahead.
From a legal perspective, if you've attained the age.
Very final thoughts,
right,
by the way.
If you've attained the age, even if on appeal, one would think that you're gracious enough to accept that, as I have continuously said in the public, the office is more important than any individual. We are at that point where I would trust, hope, believe, and pray that she would look upon the situation and decide that the office is too important to continue to be the subject of political discourse, and not, even if she has the option, even if the court says she can elect to do so.
Final, quick few seconds from you, Mr. Williams, because we have to go.
I thought that the gracious thing to have done when the judgment came down on Friday was for the DPP to step aside. But that notwithstanding, she saw that there was something problematic, and she, even though she framed it as ambiguity, she did the right thing. I don't anticipate that she will be in that office again.
Well, take the time to thank our guests, Attorney at Law and Principal Director of the National Integrity Action, NIA, Daniel Archer, and Michael Williams, Attorney at Law and Political Commentator. Thank you both for your time and perspectives on the issues. That's Lead Story. I'm Nika Lewis.